Imagine living in a world where everything is understood through feelings. No words, no concepts, just body, reaction, resonance. Welcome to your horse's perspective. Emotions aren't a luxury, they are biology, the operating system that decides whether your horse is learning, fleeing, or connecting. My name is Selina Skogan. I am your host and I am the founder of Equidemia, where we are trying to bridge evidence and training, science and soulfulness. In this episode, we are diving beneath the surface again. How boring again. How the body is feeling, how learning really works, and why emotions are the most honest feedback system in horse training. I'm inviting you to a new episode of the Equidemia podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. Last time, we talked about how easily we misread emotions and why perception isn't a window to the truth. Today, we are going a level deeper inside the horse and into the biology of the feeling itself. So we need to understand that emotions are nothing that are moods or attitudes, but that there is a biological, physiological process in motion, the system that constantly evaluates how safe or dangerous something feels. So if we want to work with that, we can't ask the horse to suppress the emotion because it's not capable of doing that. It's simply not in their biology, but we can change the way horses feel about certain situations and we can make them feel safe. And once we understand that language, training becomes quite something else, I would say. It's less a conditioning of behavior, but communication in between two beings, two souls, two nervous systems. So let's dive into the first chapter, and that is what emotions really are. And then we need to understand that each emotion is beginning with a stimulus, a signal from the environment or from within the body itself. A sound, a scent, or a subtle change in posture. Anything the horse's nervous system is picking up and deems potentially relevant. That stimulus travels through an afferent pathway, the sensory input routes from the sense organ, the sensory organ itself, to the central nervous system. The first stop is the thalamus, the brain's sorting center for sensory input. And here the brain decides whether the stimulus deserves attention. If it does, it can take two pathways. We have a fast and a slow route. Both are pretty fast, but still it's, there's a difference in between the fast and the slow route. The fast subcortical route is straight to the amygdala, and the slower cortical route to the prefrontal cortex, where experience and context comes in. There, we need to remember that in horses' brains, it's the prefrontal cortex is working a little bit different than in human brains. So a horse can't suppress the feeling, and it's also not filtered like it is in a human brain from the prefrontal cortex. But we have the dominant route, the dominant routine is basically the fast subcortical route straight to the amygdala. And that amygdala, that reacts within milliseconds, long before the cortex can think, what was that? And the cortex in a horse's mind isn't working like that anyway, because we have a direct connection to the motor pathway. So there we simply need to make a difference in between horse brain, human brain. And I think that is super important to understand for us as horse owners, because this put yourself together, that we are often asking horses to do, that is simply not possible for the pony. But what it can do is that it can judge with the amygdala, which is something like the fire alarm, the smoke alarm in the brain. It can say, okay, is there smoke or is there nothing? That is what is more important in that situation. And the more tools the horse is having, and now I'm losing my red thread, but the more tools the horse is having, the higher the amount of resilience, the more the amygdala will decide, okay, I can deal with the situation. There's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason to be stressed. And here we are breaking another we are breaking another lens for saying, okay, it always makes sense to work on understanding, to work on relationship, and to give horses a safe surrounding. So back to my red thread. The fast route dominates in horses. And if the amygdala is detecting potential threat, it activates the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, again, then sends an afferent signal, an outgoing nerve command to the autonomic system, to the autonomic nervous system, and the endocrine system. And we remember the autonomic nervous system is called autonomic because you can't control it. It's autonomic, it's doing its own job. And then firing up the endocrine system. So we take this, we take as an example simply because it's so nice and palpable. We take stress, we take the HPA axis. The hypothalamus is talking to the pituitary gland, and that is talking to the adrenal glands. The adrenals release cortisol and adrenaline, preparing the body for action. Heart is beating faster, breathing is deepening, muscles are tensing, digestion slows down, and energy floods into the system. Every cell is ready for survival. And at the same time, afferent signals from within the body, sensors in muscles, organs, and skin, send updates back again to the brain. So you have this feedback loop. And it's telling the brain, this is what is happening here. Those body-to-brain messages shape what we consciously or unconsciously experience as a feeling, just that the horse is not naming it, it's expressing it. It's only us humans who can express that vocally. So the full loop looks a little bit like this. So we have a stimulus, sensory processing, evaluation, hormonal activation, body response, feedback feeling. Emotion, in short, isn't a thought. It's communication within the body. A biological dialogue between perception and action. In horses, this loop runs faster, more directly, and with less cognitive filtering. Because evolution shaped them for rapid survival decisions. They don't think about emotions. They are emotions. They express them directly. Again, the direct connection to the motor cortex. And that makes them both exquisitely sensitive to reading us, to reading our body language, for example, and also easily overwhelmed if they don't feel safe. So if you're experiencing horses that really do feel safe, like when you're seeing here my horses out on their pasture, they feel very safe at home. They like being at home. And it takes a lot to get them to react with a flight reaction. They don't even fall into freeze or flight when we have moose hunt once a year on the other side of the mountain. Pretty calm with that. That looked very different when I was living in a different environment in Germany. So, you need to put it into context. And I think it is much too easy when we are only finding the point and saying, okay, horses need to be overreactive or need to be very reactive because they are flight animals. It's not that easy. It's not that obvious. Let's take a few practical examples that I've prepared for you. For example, typical now for autumn, the flapping raincoat in the riding arena. So you're on the riding arena, it's windy. And now in autumn, it might happen that you or yourself, it might happen that you or somebody else, I got distracted, you or somebody else was putting a raincoat over the fence. You didn't want to wear it while riding, maybe even not because you were worrying about that the horse is reacting on this sound that is coming out there when you're moving with the raincoat. I know a lot of students who are doing that. They put the raincoat off when they are riding because they are scared that the horse is getting scared of the raincoat instead of teaching the horse. This is nothing to worry about. But anyway, back to our example. So this raincoat is hanging there. Nobody asks the horse, but we as humans, we barely notice. But our horses, that also has something to do with how the mind, how the memory of the horse is working. And how it is experiencing its environment. And horses have a nearly photographical memory. And And that means if something has changed in the environment, in their surrounding, they will quickly react on that. So this raincoat is hanging there now, and the horse will react on it anyway, just because it's different than usual. But now it's maybe also flapping, it's windy, right? So the afferent signal from the eyes and ears reach the amygdala, and the evaluation is unknown, possibly dangerous. Within milliseconds, the hypothalamus is firing, adrenaline floods the system, heart rate spikes, and muscles are contracting. So before you can even think or say, relax, it's just a jacket, your horse is already, full flight response. And it's important to understand that this is not disobedience, it's biology. It's biology doing its job, if we like it or not. The good news is, and we will come back to that later during this podcast, is it is biology, but we aren't helpless in this situation. So if we have a long-term strategy, for giving our horses agency, for building up resilience, and for having a good relationship in between human and horse, we can change the outcome of the situation. So the horse is still saying, okay, there is something that doesn't belong there, but I don't need to shriek because my human is calm. Keep that in your mind. We are falling back on that a little later. Because now I would like to show you the opposite end of the scale. And we are taking a different day and a different reaction from maybe a different horse. We have a horse that is pretty sensitive, that is pretty internal. We have an arena, and you are working on something simple, maybe bending and styling. So we have a very low activation level, at least in a physical perspective. But suddenly the horse is stopping to respond. He just stands there, standing still, doesn't want to move. And many are calling that very disobedient. Some are even calling that very obedient because the horse is so nice and calm and just standing there. But let's have a look at what happens neurobiologically, because that is the opposite. The amygdala is firing, cortisol rises, and instead of running, the body shifts into freezing, the afferent protection mode under overload. So the horse is freezing because it has understood or has the experience in its life that it can't change the outcome of the situation. It doesn't have agency enough to leave, for example, but basically it is overwhelmed. The system has shut down for coping, basically. It doesn't know how to differently, how with a positive outcome, handle this situation. And this is very important because then usually people are getting the well-meant advice that now this horse needs to go forward. But that is the wrong end on that we are starting. So that the horse isn't moving is not the problem. The problem is the overwhelm the horse is dealing with, and that it doesn't have enough agency, that it doesn't have a better strategy to cope with this overload. So if we want to make a positive turn to that, we need to build up a long-term strategy and give the horse back agency and teach the horse resilience and positive emotions. And that is what we will have a look at now. Because here on the channel, we have been talking a lot about pain responses, stress and stress responses, and how to recognize that and how to react and deal with it. But if we really want to have a long-term strategy, we also have to have a look at the positive emotions on the other side of the coin. And I will still continue to talk about negative emotions like stress and pain because they are so underestimated. We see so many horses there in such a bad shape. I had a horrible clinic last week. You can't imagine it. In so much stress and pain, and people are simply not acknowledging it. They don't see it. They don't see the gait abnormality. They don't see the pain phase. And they don't see that the horse has difficulties to find a foot and that it can still stand. But that's a different topic. Today we are staying on the other side of the coin, and we are bringing a little bit light into the positive, or into positive approaches, what we can do with it. Let's have a look at the chemistry of feelings. Because behind every emotion is a neurochemical cocktail that decides how horses react and whether they are learning or not. We have picked out now here in the preparation, we picked out cortisol, dopamine, and oxytocin simply because they're so common. Everybody has heard of them and they are so important. There's a few more, there's a little bit more going on than that. Believe me when I'm saying that. But we are keeping here the hands-on approach and starting with these hormones. So this is a rabbit hole. You can't stop going in deeper. It's a whole field. It's called neuroscience, and it's definitely worth to dive a little bit into it. But this is a podcast format, so we do what we can for spiking your interest, I would say. So let's have a look at cortisol, which is the survival hormone. And cortisol spikes when the system senses danger. In short bursts, it's very useful. It sharpens focus, mobilizes energy, makes you fit for the flight response or fight response. If we have that on a chronic level, however, it is inhibiting the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the brain's memory center. We can also simplify that and say stress makes stupid. In a paper from 2015, McBride and Parker found that horses under chronic training stress showed elevated cortisol levels and slower learning, which is, basically showing the evidence to our theorem here. That means that the more stress the horse is experiencing during training, the slower it will learn, the slower it will evolve. Even more interesting is that if we are having horses that are living with a chronic stress response, under chronic stress, not only training stress, but chronic stress, so also in the environment, we are seeing that the cortisol isn't spiking any longer, but that the cortisol is suppressed eventually, so the heart is not exploding. Very handy that the body has a mechanism like this, but also there we can say stress makes stupid. So the horses are not getting smarter in that environment. They will get eventually less and less sharp. And there we are going then eventually also into the area of learned helplessness. Let's go to the next point, which is dopamine. And dopamine, that is a molecule of expectation. And dopamine rewards not only the outcome, but the anticipation of reward. It motivates repetition of behaviors that lead to good things, meaning that is a reason why positive reinforcement works in training. Also for that, we have a study that is a piece from 2008. And there Warren Smith and McGreevy found that positively reinforced horses showed less stress and more curiosity. That is a dopamine response. We also see that, for example, in clicker training, where the click is a promise for the food reward, and that's one of the reasons why horses like that so much. Little warning I have to give you here, because I also see horses in training, especially the ones that are, having not such a positive environment, or that are struggling a lot with pain in their life. They are often getting a little dopamine affected. Yeah, affected is not the right. Addicted was the word I was searching for. They are getting a bit dopamine addicted. So there I'm seeing often that when they're in training or in exercise, that they are doing all this in my field, in classical riding and academic riding, I see that when somebody is lifting the whip and they are supposed to do a quarter in, or they're supposed to do a school halt, and then we don't talk about a horse that is proud on what it is doing, but when we are seeing this horse that is repeating it all the time, and then they So then we can be sure we see here an addiction of dopamine. That's also when we want to do something completely different with the horse, but the horse is just repeating the same and the same and the same exercise. So it's giving itself its own dopamine kick. That is a bit scary. Then we need to become dangerous. But in general, dopamine is a very good thing. And that is something that we actively would like to use for enhancing a learning response or that learning happens. Last but not least, here in our threesomeness, we have oxytocin. And oxytocin, this is the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is rising during calm, rhythmic contact, grooming, touch, proximity. It is lowering the pulse and cortisol response and is increasing trust. So this is a good thing. And this is also the good news. This is something we can fall back on. I've been talking before about the bond in between human and horse, the social connection. So if we have a horse that for whatever reason goes very high on cortisol and we do have a good bond, we can use this effect of oxytocin awarely, effectively for calming the horse down again. And then, of course, here we also have a few papers, and one of them is Sankey et al. From 2001, University of Rennes, that is proving that quiet grooming raised oxytocin levels and improved heart rate variability. So you scratch your horse's wither, for example, and then the heart rate goes down again after it has been spiking very much before. In the last episode, we were discussing already that this is suggesting that we have a safe environment, only works in a safe environment, and with a human you feel happy with. If there's an idiot that you really don't like, they can scratch as long as they want and nothing will happen. But I think this is another paper that is giving us evidence about that it's worth it. It's not only wusa, it's not only because we think it's nice, but it's really worth it to invest into a good relationship in between human and horse. So we have then emotional safety, and it's not only a feeling, it's not only wusa, it's measurable physiology. And that is bringing us forward to the topic of emotions and learning. Because learning what is happening there as a cognitive event is an emotional regulated biological process. The hippocampus, which is responsible for the memory, is working best when arousal is moderate. Also, for that, we come back to that point later. We have a few studies that we have already discussed in the last episode to this podcast. But just to sum it up here, that everybody can follow is that too little activation is creating boredom. Too much activation is stress and shutdown. That is the classical Yerkes-Dodson curve. And if you're a member at Equidemia, then you maybe have been hearing me or Frauke in one or the other webinar discussing that, talking about that. The Yerkes-Dodson curve is an upside-down bathtub. So you have a U that is standing the wrong way around. And learning is peaking in the middle, in between safety and mild challenge. Christensen et al. Has been showing in 2006 that under time pressure, horses made more mistakes and learn slower. Stress makes stupid. From 2017, we know that positive emotional states lead to faster learning and longer retention. And last but not least, we see McGreevy et al. In 2018 that effective learning requires emotional balance, not fear, not apathy. And there is more. In 2023, so a quite recent paper from Dr. Kat Henschel is showing that horses don't just feel emotion during training, they remember it. And in her study, she's showing horses that are trained by negatively aroused humans. And they are learning slower and performing much worse the next day. So basically, they can't remember. The human's emotional state become part of the horse's memory trace. And I think that is what is really interesting, because it's not just a background noise, it's part of what and when things are getting learned. So let's put that into practice. And let's, for example, take a situation that nearly all horse owners know, and that is loading the horse onto a trailer. And when you have this typical situation where 20 people are standing around you and everybody knows best, most likely you will experience stress, and you don't feel so comfortable in the situation. And surprise, surprise, of course, your horse is not entering the trailer. And the longer you're trying, the worse it is getting. And now you can explain with evidence why it is like this and why the whip doesn't belong on the horse, but on the humans that are standing there giving stupid comments and should keep their ideas for themselves, and why you are getting a much better result if you are doing it calm, carefully, correctly on your own. Then we have laterality research. That is also giving us a few more markers. And this is the moment where I'm wondering if I've maybe put together a few too many facts for one podcast episode. That is up to you to decide in there. And you can write me an email if it was too much or too little. But it is so interesting. And you can see, you can just dive in deeper and deeper and deeper. And as this is what we are doing in the masterclass and in the membership, I have been getting used I've been getting used to this type of language. So if it is too much, I am very sorry. You don't have to listen further. I think you got a lot of information, or chop it into pieces. Do it calmly, carefully, correctly. So back to our laterality research. And there we are discussing which side of the horse you see, left or right, reveals its emotional bias. So that doesn't mean if you are standing on the left or on the right, but which side of the horse, so which side the horse is turning towards you and through which eye it is experiencing its environment. Two papers that are indicating that, or we have a lot of research towards laterality, and we have been learning. We also have a cool podcast towards that, where we have been talking to the laterality research group. Where we have been learning that there's different parts in the brain which are responsible, so different hemispheres that are responsible for different things. And that stressed horses are using their left eye, hence the right hemisphere, more often when they were stressed. So the hemisphere linked to vigilance and negative emotion is more often used, or the less safe the horse is feeling. When calm or curious, they switch to the right eye. So you can literally see the emotional tone of your learning in gaze, posture, but also in body asymmetry. And if your horse keeps looking at you with the left eye, he is not, it's not because he's seeing something through the left. It's about how he feels or how he does not feel in the situation. He is lacking the feeling of safety. And there again, we have it because learning is embodied emotion. And the safer the horse is feeling, the safer it's feeling in the brain, the more it will also reflect on the physical perspective. And that is leading us directly into understanding emotions in training. Because when a horse is standing still, it doesn't always mean it's calm. Sometimes it's bubbling under the surface. And we know that especially for us, for the academic riders, that we like to have horses standing still for teaching the aids, but also for supervising the emotional state. So how is the horse standing calm? Is it tense standing, or is it calm standing? Can it lower the head? The same is a reminder I'm always putting out for our body workers here, that chewing doesn't always mean it's relaxing or it's processing sometimes. It's processing something, not sometimes. It first means the mental state is changing. maybe to relaxation, but maybe also to activation. And that is why we need physiological markers and why we always need to say context is king. Look at ear position, blink rate, muscle tone, how the heart, so how open or closed are the eyes, breathing, and of course, if we can measure it, also heartbeat variability. And here comes the good news, because from 2019, and we see that in a lot of other people's too, in a lot of other people, in a lot of other papers too, we have Keeling et al. That is showing that horse and human heart rhythms can synchronize during training. That is a phenomenon which is called co-regulation. We know that also among humans, among parents and children, also among other pets, so the pets that are living with us in a household, that we are adapting, that the state of our nervous system is adapting to the environment that we are creating together. That means if I am very calm and we have a very good connection to each other, with each other, in the moment where the horse is receiving a stimulus, and the amygdala is still thinking about feeling safe or not safe, and I am calm, the horse will respond calmer than without the bond. The other way around, if I am very aroused and then a leaf is flying over the riding arena, you get this overshooting reactions. And that is very important because, first of all, we can understand it. We can understand what's going on. Second, we understand it's worth it to invest into the relationship. And third, we know that our own emotional state is affecting how the training outcome is and how the horse is experiencing safety and the environment or not. That means emotional competence is a trainer skill. And this is one of the most important skills for me as a trainer when I'm working with my students, because I am observing what my students and the horses, what are they doing, and where do I need to hold space, and where do they need a little advice on one or the other skill. But what they definitely don't need is that they have a trainer in their ear, and I'm teaching mainly online, so they have a trainer in their ear who's talking all the time and telling them all the time what they should do or not do, or how wrong they are, because the only thing I'm getting then is a rise in cortisol response and less learning effect, but more stress. So we are not only training horses with muscles, but also with our nervous system. And while technique matters, without emotional competence, it's basically hollow. Because training also means shaping emotions and turning uncertainty into curiosity, for example, tension into focus, or fear into trust. And that only works if you yourself are regulated first, and if your teacher is not an asshole. Let's say that too. So your breath, your heart rhythm, your muscle tone, all of that is data. And your horse is reading it if you want to or not. So the most powerful skill of all is not dominance, is regulation. And let's wrap this up, and let's shortly see what have we learned this time. So what are the tools that we have been putting into your toolbox? In the last episode, we have been talking about bias and why what we are seeing, what we think we see, is not always reality. In this episode, we have been looking a little bit at biophysiology. We have been looking at what is an emotion. We have been looking at the stimulus that needs to be transported to the brain and that it makes a physical reaction. We have been looking, like as an example, on 3 different hormones and what they are creating in the body: cortisol, dopamine, and oxytocin. We have been looking at what happens, or what can we learn about learning? Let's say it like this. And why is it important to understand that we understand how horses' emotions are working when we are thinking about learning. Then we have been discussing that context is a skill for understanding emotions in training. And last but not least, we have been talking about emotional competence, co-regulation, and why it is such a powerful tool to build up a good relationship with your horse, but also to find your inner calm. I hope you could put something into your toolbox. So next time your horse is showing very strong emotions, I don't want to say overreacting, because it's now, it's not overreacting. It just has a very strong biological response. You ask yourself, what is his body telling me? And what does he need to feel safe again? And we have to be aware that this is nothing that we can switch on, switch off, but that we can, that we need a long-term strategy. We need a long-term strategy to work with that, to build up relationship, to build up safety. And for that, the horse needs a reliable partner, and that is you. So if you want to learn more about things like this and don't want to go against the emotions of the horse, but with the emotions of the horse, you are very welcome at the Equidemia campus. There we are trying to bridge, science and soul. Basically, we are training on evidence-based, and we are doing that on the base of the academic training principles and belief in pedagogy, relationship, but also gait analysis. I wish you a very good weekend, and please remember to leave us a like, a comment, and or to share the podcast with your friends if you liked it. See you next week for next episode of the Equidemia podcast. Have a good week. See you soon.